Nice to meet you, kind of. My name is
I'm not here.
Juno.
Hi, Juno.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Okay, good. I'm worried. I hope my Wi-Fi doesn't act up because it has in the past, but let's hope it stays okay.
Well, if it
Um,
does, we'll just reschedule.
okay. Thank you. That's good. Yeah. So I'm recording this to put on the database. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm Juno. It's December 22nd, 2020. And we're here to talk about common lives, lesbian lives. And if you could say your name and where you're currently located.
Sure. It's Carla Randall, and I'm currently in Auburn, Maine.
Maine. I love Maine. Um, okay. I guess I'd love to know how you first got or how you first learned about and got involved with common lives.
Well, I was living in Iowa City, where Common Lives was housed through the Women's Resource and Action Center, or what we referred to as RAC.
Mm.
Um, and that was, I've thought back about time, and I don't actually remember the exact years. So it would have been in the 80s. And I think I was part of Common Lives for, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you probably know more about that memory than I have in my head, but um,
But only if you want me to, like, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I just have like because we're databasing all of common lives that are there. So just from like 1988 to 1990 and from 27 to 35 issues. Is that true?
yeah, I think it was longer than that, but sure.
Yeah,
Um,
you know better.
but memories fade, so sure. And I was part of the community, just as the lesbian community in Iowa City, which I came out in, well, sort of came out in that community. I'd been living in Cedar Rapids, which is not too far from Iowa City, where I was going to school. I had moved there from Indiana, where I had gone to nursing school, and moved to Cedar Rapids to go to Coe College. And um, in the process of all of that, um, came out to myself and to friends and whatnot, and then spent 6 months in Texas and hated it, and then moved to Iowa City. So that was all over the course of, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And
Wow.
so I moved to Iowa City in 81, I think it was. And um, as a baby dyke, and kind of learning the community, which was well established by then. I sort of came out kind of at the end of lots of things happening in Iowa City, because the women's um, printing press was going strong in the 80s. There was a coffee house that was going strong. There was just lots happening that I was, coming out to and going into in terms of those early 80s. And I'd been on the on RAC's board for a couple of years, and Common Lives was housed in the Women's Resource and Action Center. We were given
Okay. Yeah.
space. So we had um, some basement space, and we had kind of not really an office, it was sort of an open space, but it was ours. It was against the wall. There were a couple of desks and whatnot, a filing cabinet, that sort of thing, that we were able to use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so somehow I got invited, did I want to be a part of, did I want to come join the collective? And it's like, well, what's that about? And sure, why not? I mean, it was a way to give back to the community, both locally, but also nationally, internationally, really. And yeah, and it was just, some of my friends were already on the board or were part of Common Lives or had been in Common Lives. And so it was just kind of like this event that just unfolded for me.
Yeah. And when you heard about it, like, had you heard of anything? Well, I guess, had you heard of anything before like it, or was it kind of a new idea?
Was it a new idea? You mean for me?
Yeah. I
Because
guess.
it had been around for years prior to my becoming involved. Was it a new idea? Well, no, I mean, I'd been to Michigan. I had been to, I was getting LC already, so that there was a connection. And I don't know, I don't think I had a subscription to Common Lives, but it was around, there were copies around rack. My friends had copies, so it wasn't. Yeah, and there was a bookstore in Iowa City called, I'm not going to remember the name of it now. I'll think of it at some point. There was a women's bookstore that when I was going to again, which was like, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes away in Cedar Rapids, I would end up in Iowa City at the bookstore. And so there were copies there, and I probably bought a copy occasionally. So it wasn't by any means new
Yeah,
to me. It's sort of kind of like always been there.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, what were some of your specific responsibilities with Common Lives?
Well, we were all, those of us that were in the collective at the time, we were all involved in reading manuscripts and deciding what would go into the journal. We all read proofs. At some point, I became the office manager, which meant, I don't know, I probably spent 5 to 10 hours a week responding to requests for for the journal, picking up the mail. We all individually responded to authors that we wrote letters to, so either acceptance letters or rejection letters. So that wasn't part of the office manager's job, but it was to indicate that we had received their submission and to give them some sort of timeline in terms of when it was going to be reviewed. And then subscription requests, and we would get a fair number of books from publishers. So during the 80s, I probably read 90% of any lesbian books that were being authored, because they would come in and they were free, and we didn't always write reviews about them, but it was a nice kind of perk for those of us in the collective to be able to have easy access to things like that.
That totally. Oh, so the publishers would send the books to potentially have it in the book review section of Common Lives? Okay. That is fun, I bet.
Yeah, it was great.
Did you remember like some of your favorite books or things from reading that?
Oh, I mean, they were all, I'm not going to remember titles. There was a detective series. There were a couple of series that it was really fun to get. Once or twice a year we'd get, they would publish something, but I'm not gonna remember. It's been so long ago.
So what was particularly memorable about your work with the journal?
Oh, the camaraderie, the the working together with a group of women that were on the collective was just an incredible learning experience. I have the utmost respect for those folks who started the collective and sort of set the, I won't even say ground rules, because it kind of evolved, but there were some, basic feminist principles that were at play in terms of how we responded to each other, how we responded to people who wrote in, how we made decisions collectively. It was an incredible, just an incredible experience in terms of teaching me that we really can live and work together in ways that aren't part of the patriarchal system.
Wow, that's amazing thing to be part of. I'd love to hear like more stories, or kind of to more visualize that like community at that time.
Yeah,
Like
well,
if
we
you have
met,
any
I'm
other.
trying to remember, we met, I want to say regularly, but it wasn't necessarily weekly. And a lot of it was based on the production schedule in terms of when we would meet. And we would, everyone read everything that came in. We might be assigned to sort of, not really assigned, it was more of a volunteer to be responsible for responding to the author. And then we might lead the discussion, but everything was done collectively. I mean, if one person had a hesitation to outright rejection of a piece, we would discuss it until we were in agreement. And it wasn't like we were trying to convince people one way or the other. It really was to hear each other out and what we either liked about a piece or what we had issues or difficulty with. And sometimes that meant we didn't publish something, or sometimes it meant that we would publish it, but we heard the other person's hesitation or reason why they either didn't like it or weren't sure that it was, appropriate for the journal. And we came to consensus. It was more like you didn't have to love the piece, but you had to be okay with it being in the journal. And I think that's probably one of the key things that I learned was you didn't have to love something to, have it move forward. It was okay. And it was okay collectively. It's not even so much about the story that was being published. It was about our response to it and how we respected each other's thinking and opinion. I won't say it was a magical time, but it was a real engaged time, and it was just an amazing way to interact with a group of people, with a group of women.
Yeah, that seems special, definitely. And I mean, so we're kind of working on publishing a Sinister Wisdom all about common lives, which is why we're having these interviews, and to learn more about it and to kind of get somewhere to bounce off from. But I guess what strikes me about Common Lives is it seems really special in its like mission to be such a cooperative, and also for like to publish such diverse voices and kind of identify what commonness is or was. And yeah, I was wondering if you could speak on just what about Common Lives, Lesbian Lives maybe was different from other publications at the time to you.
Different. Well, I think a lot of it had to do with creativity of lesbians, in terms of it wasn't like um, it wasn't like LC in that um, it was, people's creativity that so much of what's in LC and continues to be are, everyday events or things that are happening in people's lives, or information, but it was kind of, those are short and and specific to the individual. What was kind of fun about Common Lives was that it was a place where creativity was in the forefront. So um, you know, being able to read people's short stories, and sometimes it was fiction, sometimes nonfiction, and then to be able to blend that with art. That there was always visual art of some sort, either on the cover or throughout the journal. So it was a nice combination of creativity. You might want to stop the recorder for just a second. I have bread in the oven and I need to go check it.
Yeah.
It has a life of its own, and so it was supposed to be done before 3 o'clock and it wasn't. So
Okay, I'll pause.
let me just step away and deal with that. I'll be right back. Sure.
Okay. So some other questions is who else worked with you on it? Like if you have names or just like, yeah,
Well, I mean, you have all the names in the journal. I mean, in
yeah.
the magazine. But I mean, probably one of the most, I won't say significant, but she taught me a lot. And she was kind of leaving the collective as I was coming into the collective, was Tess Catalano. And Tess has since died. She died in, it's been, let's see, I've been here 17 years. So it's probably been 20, 25 years ago that Tess died.
Mhm.
But we also played on the RAC softball team. So that's the other. I don't know how many people you've talked with already in the collective.
Only one other before, but I've never heard about the softball team, so
So,
please tell me.
I mean, all of these groups sort of come together. Like people. I mean, women were in multiple groups, if you will. So there was the softball group, and within the softball group, we were called the RAC Rats, RATS, for Martina Navratilova. Anyway, sort of took our name from that. And then there was the Blue Stockings, which was the group that were predominantly the academics, and at the University of Iowa in terms of women's studies or women's athletics. And there was the RAC group, which the Women's Resource and Action Center was funded primarily by the University of Iowa. I mean, it had a university space, and some of the employees were employed by the university, even though the university kind of kept its distance from us. It was still part of the university. So we would so the Women's Softball League had these two lesbian teams that would we would play everybody, but when we played together, we dressed up. And again, I came into this sort of, it had been going on for years before I was there, but I think it first started out like they would dress up in wedding gowns and tuxes and who knows, all kinds of stuff. And then it sort of evolved into more like Halloween costume kinds of variety of things. And we would play softball
Wow,
against each
that's
other
really great.
and dressed up. It was hilarious. The community, Iowa City during the 80s was just, for me, was absolutely a wonderful, wonderful community.
Mm,
I couldn't imagine having a better community to come out in and to be a part of.
wow, that's really
And it had a
like
long
great.
history prior to my being, sort of being even aware of it. And I think for me, I have great respect for the women that came before me, some of whom were part of the community when I was there, but many of them were sort of leaving or moving away from the community. I mean, by that I mean moving to other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And they had been there for years, and it was just time to do something else in their lives. So I came into this community with this rich history that had been before me, and I think a lot of the battles, if you will, had been fought prior to my being there. So I had the advantage of it being wonderful as opposed to, tension and lots of hard work and hurt feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
all of that had happened before I was really aware of any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I mentioned that because
Yeah.
there were, no, I don't even know that I necessarily can say there were stories, but there was mention of things,
Mm.
having
Like,
happened years
and what
before,
they
or hurt feelings, or those two don't talk because, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. And you like kind of got you when you came into that you heard of the stories and from the people who had been there since then.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean there were I guess Common Lives, Lesbian Lives was for me, it was such an integral part of the lesbian community that it's hard to separate it out. That the women's press had been publishing Common Lives for years, and during the time that I was there, we had the press closed, and so we
Mm.
had to find another publisher. And we used the university publishers for a while, and um, but again, then some of the same people in the collective or had been in the collective were part of the softball team. They were part of the coffee house. We were part of the folks who put on the concerts. And it wasn't always necessarily the same people, but we all overlapped in different areas of the community. And so it's for me, it was all sort of the same thing. We just had different roles or different places where we worked within the community.
Oh wow, so that cooperative like of Common Lives was even reflected on a much bigger scale, like in the community, it seems. And it was very interconnected as well.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah,
Wow.
and people that were part of the coffee house had been in the collective and weren't any longer, or they were, some of the folks who brought in the entertainment for the concerts, or were involved in other activities that were going on at the Women's Resource and Action Center. So that again, we cross paths frequently in different roles or different areas of the community.
Yeah. And could you tell me a little bit more about finding a new publisher for Common Lives, or what happened there, that process after the Women's Press shut down?
Yeah, there's probably other people that were in the collective that were more involved in that. But because we were transitioning to the university about the time I think I came into the collective, and we just had to find somebody to print us. And being part of the university, we could access those resources. That was a really great thing about how RAC worked for the lesbian community, but for the community at large, was because we were part of the university, we could use space. We could use resources. You know, the concerts could go through the Women's Resource and Action Center, and you know, we got a very reduced rate for the auditorium. We got, you know, it was kind of magical, if you will, to have this radical group associated with the university, and clear that we were, I mean, part of it because we needed the resources. I don't think that we could have been as visible or as accomplished if we hadn't had that connection. Even though the tension was there between the university and us, we all sort of, I think, ignored many of those issues.
Yeah,
but, you know, it's an established organization that you know, isn't necessarily lesbian friendly.
Yeah, what sort of kind of times were there butting heads, or like what things did the university kind of try to do?
Well, you know, it was always I don't know that they necessarily tried to do anything necessarily in opposition. It was just we got to be the sort of radical arm, if you will, and they let it, if anything, they let it happen as a way of being supportive without having to take a position. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it was there, but they didn't have to.
Right.
Do
it's kind of like that they're doing that over there, and we won't claim a lot of responsibility for it, but on some level it was okay, it was happening because, you know, they gave us space and money. And but let me my bread's probably done, so let me go check that.
Okay.
There's something to trade, and so they pay me, but I love trading.
Yeah, I think that's the best what you get back.
Right. Anyway, sorry about that interruption. Okay.
Oh no, it was so fun. I really enjoyed seeing that, Brad. Oh yeah, we were talking about the relationship between the university and RAC. And yeah, was there other, like, well, you said, I guess everything was interconnected. I guess I'm wondering about the other, like if there are other lesbian groups, or even maybe like gay groups, and what that kind of intersection was like, or.
Well, again, lots of things happen through the Women's Resource and Action Center, and so I don't know that they would necessarily be like separate groups. There was the rape advocacy program that was also housed at RAC, and you know, people would I can remember that the rape program was we had come up with a I don't know what we called it. This is great. This is making me think back like 30 some years, and it's like, whoa, I haven't thought about the names of any of these things. It was a car service that a woman could call and ask for a ride.
That's great. Wow.
And so there were folks who drove, there were folks who volunteered to answer the phone. I mean, this was all before cell phones too. I mean, we have to like keep that in mind, and really before, I mean, I won't say before computers, but computers were sort of a new thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't get my first computer until 1985.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah. So it was all, we all had to like be together or make phone calls, or, it wasn't quite the same as it is today, where you can shoot off an email to someone. That we really had to
Yeah.
interact a lot more. Um,
Yeah.
and and again, there were lots of folks that were connected to other parts of the community. So I mean, there was a gay men's group, and there was, women that were friends with some of the men in the group. There was um, but a lot of stuff went through RAC, in terms of, again, having a forum to make announcements, having a means by which we could make announcements. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, the bookstore did that too, and somewhere along in there, the bookstore closed. Um, the coffee house was another place where um, lots of communication occurred in terms of what was happening and when. Um, there was a group. There was a group called Hera Psychotherapy. Um, that was another place where, lots of women were in therapy, in and out of therapy, and so that was kind of a safe therapy group, that lots of members of the community used.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from what you're saying, it really seems like, and even what you said in the beginning about how feminism really informed a lot of what was happening in these groups. But I was wondering if you could speak a little more on that, of kind of how feminism was discussed, or what around that.
Well, again, I came into the mid, I won't say the middle, I don't know exactly if it was the middle or not, but there had been a long history prior to my becoming part of the community, where a lot of the work was already done. So that when there was concerts, there was it was understood that there wasn't going to be alcohol and there wasn't going to be smoking. Like the women had already, like, and I think it sometimes battled it out literally, around what was okay or what wasn't okay in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, behavior. So I came into this community thinking, oh, well, that's just what that's how you handle it, that's what you do. Like I was on I benefited from the work that lots of women before me had done, and I think even at the time I was really aware of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was in Iowa City in my 20s, and in my 20s, and so I think part of it was just a developmental stage of where I was at as an adult, and as coming out as a lesbian, and to be in a community that had, a long history, um, and had done a lot of the hard work prior to my being there. So again, I really benefited from these women who had been in the community for decades and had worked through lots of those issues.
Yeah.
And by issues, I mean relationship issues, drug and alcohol issues, family issues. Um, there were, again, this was just at the beginning of my being part of the community, but there was a woman that had cancer and was dying, and the community embraced her, surrounded her, were vigilant. I mean, they were at her bedside, and I didn't know her, but again, the stories were so powerful that it's like, wow, this is just an amazing community to be a part of, and again, to see how folks can come together and sort of live in this patriarchal world, but also create a community that was very different.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so how what am I trying to ask? What kind of, how did you leave the journal, or how was that process for you?
Well, I moved away.
Yeah.
I left Iowa City and moved to Montana, and then within a year or two, the collective broke up. I mean, it just wasn't sustainable. Printing costs had gone up. I think that it was hard to find people to be part of the collective and really work at it. Yeah, and I was really sad when the collective, broke up and ended. It was sad because it had been such a significant and growing experience for me.
Yeah, that it felt really important in your life and in so many other people's lives too. Yeah. Well, I that's all the questions that I have, but I would love to hear if you have any more stories or, anecdotes. Also, if you think—
You asked about, people's names and stuff. I think that, I mean, I hope that you're able to reach out and find some of the other collective members. Some are still living in Iowa City. Some people I still am in touch with. And so if it's okay with you, I would send them a note. I could send them an email note and ask them to reach out to you if you're really looking for collective members to chat with.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that. I'm looking to talk to anyone involved, so that would be really great.
Yeah, because here, let's see, this was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Maybe it was 4 years ago. The women's community of Iowa City, and I make that a little bit of a distinction of not just exclusively the lesbian community, but again, they're so interconnected. There was a 40-year reunion, 40-year reunion. And I went back for that. It was really amazing. And the softball teams got together and played. Now we're all 30 years older. We played an inning each. I mean, we were, and I was probably one of the younger folks. So we're talking about, people 60, 70 years old now. And we played at noon and it was like 100 degrees outside. We were all like, are we all gonna like fall over dead? Because we dressed up. Others, but we had the one of the umpires for the games, and she always umped for the Blue Stockings and the Racks game. She came and was the umpire for the game, also an out lesbian. So it really was, it was a reunion. It was loads of fun, and the collective, the folks who attended the conference, again, it was through the university, so it was a conference, which meant at the time I could write that off on my taxes.
Oh, great.
Exactly. So the collective, spent some time together. I don't know, there was maybe a dozen of us that attended the conference and, chatted about memories about the collective.
Wow, that's really great.
And I'm still in touch with, not often, but I'm still in touch with the woman who typeset everything for the journal. So that would be a person to talk with, because she would have been part of she would have a history that's very different than my history with the collective.
I would love to hear from her then. Yeah.
So yeah, I will put together a note to folks in the next little while. And then there's Cindy Cleary, was an early person on the collective, and she's out in California. There's and I'm not going to remember the press. I'll do some thinking and some looking up some stuff and send you some other information, just in terms of ways to maybe reach out to some folks that I wouldn't necessarily have their email address or their address, but I know that some of my friends are still in touch with these folks.
Okay, yeah, that would be really great. Thank you.
I should also say, one of the other things that was kind of cool about Iowa City at that time was there were a lot of women tradespeople, and again, either their partners or they themselves might have been part of the collective, or definitely were part of the community. And so again, there was this whole interconnectedness. And there were a couple of the women who went through the trades program through the university, and then apprenticed with some of the women who were already working in the trade. So there was the plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, that we could all, hire and do great work for us. It's one of the things that when I moved out of Iowa City, and even today, I think about, it's really a shame that that the community that I'm living in doesn't have that kind of workforce.
Yeah. That seems like a very powerful thing to have in a community, to be able to.
Yeah, and Iowa City was a small enough community that we, all sort of knew each other or were aware of each other, even if we didn't hang out together. But you knew who the electrician was, or you knew who the plumber was, or it was just really different than today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been really, I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was an amazing time of I think lesbian history, for sure, and definitely for my history was extremely meaningful and had a huge impact, just in terms of my development as a person in the world.
It was a very significant time. Yeah.
Well, I'll be curious to read what you do with all of the stories that you gather, and I'm really pleased that the Common Lives isn't being forgotten.
Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, I think it not only did it impact my life, but I think it impacted a number of people's lives. I mean, locally in that community, but also in the lesbian community at large. That it was a way for artists, both written artists but also visual artists, to have a forum and a place to be published, and to have women read their work.
Yeah. And from so many different types of women, and yeah, so many, a lot of what we've read, like that was their first place that they ever got published,
right?
Which was also amazing.
Right, which is really kind of exciting, because then I can still see their names, or at the time, again, like having come out in that community and still being real new to the lesbian world, we'd get submissions from folks who then, a year later or so, they'd have a book that came into the collective. It's like, oh, right. And even now I'll notice in LC that, oh, she's still here. She's still writing, oh, right. She was in Florida. Or she's still in Florida. That's good to know. Or whatever, that it's just kind of, it's kind of fun to feel a connection to people that I've never actually met face to face, but, recognize their name or, remember their story or whatnot.
That's really true. Yeah. And you do get a whole different relationship with someone when, you read their writing. That's a really kind of intimate exchange, honestly.
Right. Well, and
So
I did. I mean, I talked about stories, but there was a lot of poetry in Common Lives, also. That it really, I think, was a way for women to share their creativity across all different kinds of venues.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many different types of writing. Yeah, just in one issue, there would be like, essays and then short stories and poetry and just a lot of different variety, which makes it so interesting to read and probably to have like edited for and stuff.
Yeah, and the editing, we talk about the editing. I didn't mention this. One of the things that being in the collective taught me was to really honor the work of the woman who's producing the writing or the drawing or whatever. That the idea of being an editor or being part of the collective wasn't to edit their work. It wasn't to change their work. It was to sort of usher it into the journal. It was more of a process than when I think about, editors of, changing people's work or making suggestions or that wasn't what we really let. Part of the process was to let the women's work speak for itself. And so did it fit into the purpose of Common Lives? Did it reflect us as lesbians, as common lesbians in the world, if you will? So that it wasn't meant to be an academic journal. It wasn't meant to be, a forum for any specific philosophy or train of thought or way of being, that all of those could coexist. And I think that was one of the most interesting things of being in the collective was to see some of the differences and variety of creativity that women could bring to the journal.
Yeah, that's really true. And there's such a level of care that I noticed from reading the editor's notes and but like mostly from what you're saying now, just care for the work being produced and for the bios of the contributors. Strike me always because it's in their own voice and it's like can go on for as however short or however long they want, which I really love.
Yeah. It was, again, I just give so much credit to the folks that started Common Lives, that they had a vision and a dream and the wherewithal to, even start it and that it continued for as long as it did. Is pretty amazing that it, is all pretty much volunteer.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, it's about time that the Zoom will we'll end. But if you, I would love to talk to you again too. And if you have anything else you want to share, like please, definitely let's stay in touch. And yeah.
Sure. And so I'm just curious, who did you speak with before me? Do you mind sharing?
Marcy Bader Stasher. She was a poetry editor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember her, but yeah, I'll go
Sorry.
ahead.
Oh, we've also been in contact with Joe Futrell and Kathy Haley, and also Tracy Moore. Yeah,
Right.
but
Tracy Moore absolutely is a person that you need to be in touch with.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, but
to
um, yeah, Diana Miller and I were on the collective together, and I still am in touch with Diana on a pretty regular basis. So I'll either shoot you some names, or I'll more than likely I'll just pass your information on to them and see who gets in touch with you.
Totally, that sounds great to me.
Great. Well, this has been loads of fun, and you've taken me back many years thinking about those times together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful.
And I'd be happy to talk with you, again, if you have other questions, or, you want to, follow up with things that somebody else said, or, whatever. I'd be happy to chat with you about it.
Cool. Thank you so much. That's really great to hear.
Sure.
I'm excited.
All right.
Have a really good rest of your day. And that bread is really good.
Yeah, you can't smell it or taste it, but it's pretty amazing. I feel very fortunate that I make 3 or 4 loaves a week.
Wow, you got it down. That's really great.
And I would probably do more. It's just I have to let it I don't know what you call it. So I mix it and let it rest and ferment, and so that's what gives it a lot of its flavor. And so
Oh.
it's like a 3-day process from start to finish. Doesn't
Mm.
involve a lot of my time. It's just, sort of scheduling it, but
It's
it has a life of its own. And so if I had another Dutch oven, I could probably, make more of them a week, but time is just fine.
That's true too.
All right, well, have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much. You too.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.